Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Just a word of warning. So we are recording tonight. So if you don't want your face showing, please turn your video off. We do record them and distribute them, these sessions on our website and on our socials so that other members of the various climate action networks and other interested groups can have a look at what we've been up to. And also in other news, I don't have technical support tonight, so I'm going to be balancing, chairing and doing the techie bits. So if I look a bit lost sometimes, just bear with me. So we do have a chat. You're free to use it. We'll record that as well and share anything relevant with our lists and our members. Progress. And because we've started, if you want to mute yourselves and then whilst I introduce the speakers tonight, that would be great, just to reduce interference. That would be amazing. So my name's Jess. I work for Transition Malvern. Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. We're really grateful to have 3 people come tonight actually. So we've got Robin Coates from Transition Malvern Hills. We've got Robin Drury-Layfield, who is local councillor and vice chair of the Environment Committee, which is brilliant. And we've also got the new bicycle mayor for Stroud, James Jeffrey, popping by a bit earlier than I expected, so thanks for that. Welcome everyone. So the way I was hoping today, well, this session would work would be we'd hear from Robin first, because he's got 2 really interesting schemes around bike. Well, I'll let him explain what they are, but they're 2 interesting bike related schemes that they've been running really successfully, to give us a bit of inspiration. And then we'll have a little bit of time afterwards to ask him any questions. And then after that, we'll go to other Robin Drury-Layfield, to hear about local opportunities for hopefully a bit of funding for any groups that are interested in developing some new projects locally. And then I'm hoping James will be able to talk a little bit after that about his vision as bicycle mayor, if that's all right with you. And we'll have lots of time afterwards for general chat and news sharing. So if any of you are new to these, we generally run these once every 2 months for climate action networks, which are small environmentally interested groups that run around the Stroud district. I support those groups to do their thing and talk to each other with lots of different things, newsletters, info sharing, all sorts of different things, and these events are part of that programme. So tonight is around active travel, and that's because our climate action networks asked for that to happen. So we're ever so grateful for your input, and we hope you'll get a lot out of this. Okay. Can I pass? I don't think there's anything else technical other than just to please mute yourselves when others are speaking. And if you want to ask a question, just put your hand up or use the little hand button. Either way, I'll spot you. Okay. Has anyone got any questions before we start? Okay, brilliant. If I can hand you over to Robin Coates then, and we'll hear from him for about 15-20 minutes. That'd be great. Okay. Thanks, Robin.
Yes, so I'm Robin Coates. I'm from the Malvern Hills area, and I was dividing this little talk into 3 sections: a tiny bit about context, and then a little bit about our current situation, and then the main piece is about our journey so far to tell you sort of how we got there. So the context is Transition Malvern Hills, an organisation called Colwell Greener, started back in 2009. And we were having projects in the 3 main areas where people's carbon footprint are. So there's a food, transport and home energy. And then we had a number of community projects in addition to that. Tonight's about transport, so we'll only focus on that. Well, it's about active travel, so transport part is part of that. So that'll be my main focus. And we, as Jess says, we've got 2 e-bike schemes, which I'll talk about mainly, but I think it's worth mentioning that we've got a car club, and car sharing, that's car sharing rather than lift sharing, complements e-bike use very well, because often people are reluctant to give up a car, but once they've tried an e-bike, they can see how many of their journeys could be done that way. And the combination of being able to have access to cars and having an e-bike is a really good offer for people. Okay, so the current state, the first e-bike scheme we started was a 2-week trial scheme called Test Before You Invest. And the idea behind that was that we live in a really hilly area, the Malvern Hills, as you probably know, and rural transport is absolutely appalling, and so is cross Malvern transport. And the Malvern Hills, from one side to the other, you can do a sort of 6-mile journey without any trouble, maybe 8 miles in some places. So, and there won't be buses that do that for you. And we started with 2 bikes, and now we've got a collection centre at Ledbury, Colwell, Malvern Link, and Powick, bit of Powick, which is called Callow End. So there's 4 collection places, and there's a total of 6 e-bikes in those different collection places. And hundreds of people have used e-bikes over the years we've been doing it. So that's the trial scheme. And then about a year ago, we've been working with Malvern District Council on their rural transport problems, and they had some COVID money available to get people back to work or get out again. And we persuaded them to put some of that money towards an e-bike to work scheme. And what we've got there is 10 e-bikes in use. This is in a year this has happened, and we've got 2 available. And we've also got a conversion bike available. And the idea is that people who either live rurally or work rurally can have a long-term rental of an e-bike, and they pay for that. So it's a rental arrangement. And initially we were focusing on young people, but in practice we've found it's all ages who are taking it up. So that's the sort of current state. So I'll just talk a bit about the journey so far. I've got a few notes in front of me if you see me scrobbling around down here. Okay, so the test before you invest. Initially, back there 14 years ago, we identified, well, I only ever saw 2 e-bikes in Malvern at that stage. That didn't seem to be very good. And e-bikes weren't at all popular in England either. They were used, you had people like motorhome people who used them. There were a lot of very bad e-bikes available. But we were in a really hilly area, and we thought it's got to be worth a try. And also e-bikes are really expensive. So for somebody to go out and buy one without having tried it on their normal journeys is a big ask, it really is. So what happens if you're not careful is they go and buy a cheap e-bike, and that becomes a disaster very fast because they can't get it maintained. It's made in China, the spares are impossible to get, and they then get different types of spares, and the compatibility issues clock up, and in no time at all it sits in the garage doing nothing. So we wanted to give them real confidence in investing in a decent e-bike, and we thought the way to do that was for them to be able to use a bike for 2 weeks on the journeys they already do and the journeys they try to do if they had an e-bike. And of course, when they do their first little trial is around here, which is pretty hilly, and they have like a little 10-minute ride, and they come back always with a big smile on their face, always absolutely amazed at how they can get up the very difficult hill right by my house. So that's a really good start. We give them a pannier, lights, locks, stand. They're all, for the trial, they're all step-through bikes, and they're all bikes with crank drive motors. That's a mid-mounted motor. Yeah, so that's the sort of philosophy behind it. And we started out with 2 relatively cheap, sort of half price, halfway between cheap bikes and good bikes, which we got secondhand as ex-demos, because getting started is always the big problem. And we got a grant from the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. They administer sustainability development fund grants for the department of whatever it is. And it's probably changed a few times since 10 years ago. So they gave us a small grant to buy these 2 bikes. That got us started. We very quickly proved there was demand for it, and that then led to us improving those bikes. And we found that if we sell the bikes after 3 years, we get an income back. We get money back from those, and a combination of that and the donations we get allows us to buy the next bike. And then we keep trolling for grants to increase the number of bikes. The way it works is we want to keep the admin to the absolute minimum. And this is absolutely key because it's all volunteer run. So the way it's done is people inquire via the web. I should think 98% of the inquiries come that way. A few come direct, but it's very few. Then we have a simple inquiries spreadsheet, which also becomes the scheduling spreadsheet. And they get a phone call from their inquiry, and then they get email. We've got a load of standard emails we send out. And then the collection times and the return times, there's an hour slot on a Friday and an hour slot on a Saturday when that happens. So it keeps the amount of time we've got to put in to the absolute minimum. To avoid the liability problems, and because insurance is so expensive, we opted for not charging. So we opted for a donation scheme. That means that because the minute you charge, you've got a contract, and then you carry all the liabilities. So by not charging, we avoided that. And obviously the amount we get donated is very variable, but it's in the end, it adds up to a decent slice of money. People often ask us how much it costs to run the scheme, and we say, well, it's about £25 a week per bike. That gives them a guide of their donation. What else is there to say? So now I mentioned that we give them panniers, and so we give them the kit so they could use the bike to do shopping and to do useful things, because we're focusing the whole time on, we're not particularly interested in helping leisure biking. We're interested in helping people see that bikes are an everyday tool. So that's the focus we've got. We think that's absolutely appropriate. So that's the test before you invest 2-week trial. And I haven't, because people don't always come back to say whether they've bought a bike, and they often don't buy one straight away. We give them advice on what to buy and where to buy. But it looks like, judging by the number of e-bikes around Malvern now, it looks like in the end, something like 40 or 50% end up buying e-bikes. A few, probably at least 10%, come back and say they'd like to buy one, but they're really scared of the roads. So that's the biggest single reason people give for not continuing. And a few say, well, they're too expensive. And then we do help people with selling our bike secondhand and advising them on what to look for if they're buying a secondhand bike. Okay, the e-bike to work scheme. So this is, as I say, attempting to help people who live or work rurally. The idea here is that they pay £15 a week, but they pay that monthly by standing order. £15 a week multiplied by 4 1/3 is £65 a month. And they can put that money, the money they've spent, towards buying that bike out at any time in their hire, but they have to provide the cash to buy it out. So if they end up later in the life of the hire, then it will obviously be a much smaller amount of money. And we give them all the money they've spent, less any maintenance money, that goes towards the cost of the bike. So it's a really nice way of them, after a few years thinking, God, I spent all this money on hire, but now I can actually choose to buy the bike, which is really good, I think. We use the same sort of bikes, only we've got crossbar bikes as well as step throughs. And once again, they get panniers, locks and lights. But because they're paying a hire, we insure these bikes, and they get helmets and high-vis jackets and a little toolkit. So we try and make it a more complete package because it's a long-term package. And there's a little contract they sign and an application form. And what we're after all the time is they meet a set of criteria, and those have to be that the bike's going to be used for getting to work or getting to training. But a lot of them now, as I said, people are actually going across Malvern. They're not necessarily, and we've got one Ukrainian. They're not necessarily living that far away rurally, but some of them are. I think that's enough from me, really, as a sort of bit of background. Or just to say, did I mention the car club's got 20 odd vehicles around Malvern and 200 families sharing those vehicles. And as I say, some people who live a bit farther out and a bit farther from the bikes, they ride from the cars, they ride an electric bike to a car and arrange to chain it up and take the car off. So it works really well for that situation. I think that's enough for me.
That sounds really inspirational, actually. Can I just ask how long they've both been going for?
Yes, the e-bike to work started with a COVID grant. So that started the very beginning of last year. I think we had the first 4 bikes the very end of the year before, and then we've increased the number of bikes as we've gone along. And we've managed to squeeze more money out of the council as we've gone along. And they've been very generous. But I think part of that generosity has been because we've supported them in thinking about rural transport for a long time. And also initially they had the COVID money they could use. And they also wrote e-bikes into their zero carbon strategy based on the support we gave around that as well. And the other scheme's been going since 2009. And the car club's 2009.
Brilliant. So there's a lot of impact for sure, Matt.
Yeah.
I think Anna's got a question.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Robin. It's really fascinating. My name's Anna. I'm CEO of Creative Sustainability. We work in Stroud with young people and bikes. James Beecham, my colleague, is also here today. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that originally you'd set out to engage young people with your bike scheme, and I wondered if actually you had young people use it, and if so, to what extent?
Yeah, we've had 4 young people. One of them's been a success story. One of them had an apprenticeship lined up, and the apprenticeship fell through, so he had to give the bike back because he didn't have an alternative at that stage. But obviously, he can have one again if he gets a need for it. And we've had 2 young people who were a nightmare, and their mum never coughed up any money, and we had to withdraw the bikes. I mean, when you get those sorts of situations, it's really tough. But we're very, very firm about it. If they don't stick with the rules, then they lose the bikes. And it's the same with running the community car club. If people start taking advantage, then they get sorted out quite quickly. And that's the only way to maintain the trust of the other members.
I'll mute myself. I'll just thanks. That's really useful. Is that okay for you, Anna? Okay, I'll take some other questions. Sorry, I keep unmuting. I'll take a few other questions because quite a few people got their hands up.
Hi, I think it's me next.
Yeah.
I'm Megan. I sit on various climate boards and youth related things, that kind of stuff. So it's going to be another youth question, sorry. I was wondering, when you say about for work or training, would there be any scope in the future to extend that to things like to education things? So I realize there's probably some limit to, you can't offer it to all school children, but whether there would be a point to offer it to sort of from age 16 upwards, whether you could extend that to sort of college, sixth form or universities, that kind of thing. Does that count as well? Could it?
If they've, so it's from 16 onwards, I should have said that, but from 16 to
Okay.
18, they have to have a parent acting as a guardian for it, or
Okay.
taking responsibility for it. And if it's all about their journey, really. So we just assess whether the journey is doable in any way by public transport or any other means. And if it's not, then they can have a bike, an e-bike.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, Robin Drury.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. That's a great presentation. It's really interesting. I was particularly taken with the idea of linking the bikes to the car share scheme, because that's something I thought about a lot here. If we have a car share scheme, the car's at the top of the hill, would people sign up to it to go, have to walk 10 minutes to get the car? I think the idea of having that facility is really, it's quite sensible, because you just cycle, drop the bike and take the car. I think that's really good. Yeah, that was it really. I just wanted to pass a comment on that. I think it's a really good initiative you got there. Thank you.
Okay.
And Martin, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Really impressive schemes, very inspiring. I wondered, a practical question, how do you organize maintenance of the bikes in the two schemes, and volunteers or shops, and I wondered also if it involves any training of people in bike maintenance?
We haven't done any of that. Maybe it's something we should consider, but my focus has been on keeping my effort to the minimum because I'm much too busy on too many things as it is. But so what we've got is we've got a local shop that does maintenance for us. The e-bike to work scheme, we ask the person to take their bike to that shop once a year, so it gets a minimum of a check over once a year for the e-bike to work. For the e-bike trials, we're seeing the bike back every 2 weeks, so I always take them a little ride, just check them out, make sure it's okay, and if it's not okay, it doesn't go back on the road, it goes to be mended. Yeah, so it's about sort of inspecting it as best we can. But we don't, apart from very simple maintenance things that I can do, I don't do any clever stuff. It's interesting that since we've gone for good quality e-bikes, we've had almost no problems with any of the electricals. They've all been problems around brakes and other things, not and people buckling wheels or punctures, those sorts of things. But the Bosch motor that we use, and we use the third, there's 4 levels of Bosch motor. We use the 3rd level because of the hills. They proved extremely reliable, and so have the battery systems and the control systems and the panels.
Yeah. No, I know that exactly. I live in Bisley at 700 odd feet above Stroud, and use my Bosch motor, gets me up the hill. Thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you so much. Has anyone else got any other questions specifically, or Paul? Oh, hi, Paul. Oh, I've lost you.
Sorry,
Oh,
couldn't unmute. So yeah, it was a very good presentation, Robin. Thanks. I was wondering how much effort it takes to administer both bike schemes. You and the other volunteers that are involved.
The handover is a fairly quick thing. That's like an hour per person who comes and collects the bike, just briefing them and then handling the collection. And by having a series of standard emails we send, actually I think the total time that we spend on each applicant is probably 2 hours. That would be my guess, because it's all very standardized to keep it simple. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes, thanks. Yeah, that was, yes, sorry. Yeah, it does.
If I may, unless anyone else has any other questions, I guess I'm just wondering, you say that you keep looking at little pots of money as you go on. What are they to cover mainly? Presumably not just new bikes. Does it ever cover your time, or are you not interested in that?
No, we do everything on a volunteer basis. Even the car club's completely volunteer. So the money is always to purchase bikes. With the car club, we also got a big pot of money to automate the cars. So we've got an app-based booking, billing and unlocking system, which we installed last year. That's made an enormous difference, the amount of time we put in, but it's also up the costs.
Okay, so you need, in turn, you need to get more grants in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's
But
really interesting.
There are, from what we can tell, there aren't other community car clubs around the place of any size, and there aren't any that don't rely on heavy subsidies. So it's a big issue, but we've been experimenting with looking at a new way of doing it. So if people are interested, I can talk about that, but I don't want to take over the conversation talking about car clubs.
I think everyone here is really interested, to be honest, but we should move on to Robin Drury Layfield.
Yeah.
But we do have time afterwards. We can all discuss after Robin's discussed his stuff as well. So if we can all move on and have a look at Robin and what he's got to say. Thank you so much. That was really insightful and inspiring, actually. Hopefully we can do something similar around here.